All right. I don't know why logging in has been known. And as the host.
Sweeney, when you get a chance, can you start my video?
Yeah. Let me make you a co-host.
Okay.
And you should be able to make yourself a awesome. You weren't able to start your video as a panelist?
I was not.
Okay. I'm gonna Slack my known.
Mine says I can't start video because you've stopped it. Is that right?
Here, let me make you a co-host. I think we might be live right now.
Yeah, there's some people in here.
Did you see how, here, Cyrus, can you just throw up the placeholder slide?
Sure, do I have it?
Yeah, you should have the slides.
Oh yeah, you sent that over to me, right?
Yes, sir.
Got it. 1 second.
Hey guys, just so you know, we're live right now. So, Cyrus, put up that placeholder slide, please.
Yep, I'm on my way. It's downloading. Give me 1 second. Almost there. 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. Font's all messed up, but I'll do it anyway. See my screen?
You just, okay. Did you put up, do I have to share the webinar from my side or do you do it?
I think you're going to be sharing the webinar from your side, so you can control the
Slides.
Yeah, you got it on your computer.
I have it on my computer.
Okay, cool.
How do I get there? How do I get there? Let me just make sure can I practice sharing it? Oh wait, I see it. Okay. At the share screen?
You share screen, exactly.
Okay.
Here, do this. Turn your camera off.
Turn my camera off.
I'm going to turn your camera off, and then I'm going to turn mine off as well. And then we can start in a little bit here, because we're live right now.
Okay.
All right, all right. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to today's webinar. Today's webinar is brought to you by Forks Over Knives. It's called Is Our Lust for Protein Making Us Sick? Today, we are honored to be here with Dr. Garth Davis. Dr. Garth Davis is the author of the book Protein-aholic and the medical director of the Davis Clinic at the Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas, and a star of the hit TLC show Big Medicine. Dr. Davis has a wealth of knowledge about how our obsession with meat is actually killing us and what we can do about it. So now, just a heads up, if you're watching this as a replay, okay, this doesn't pertain to you guys live right now, but if you stumbled across this video, you're watching it as a replay, you can go ahead and skip about 5 minutes or so ahead to the beginning of the webinar. But since you guys are live here right now, if you have a specific question that you would like Dr. Davis to answer, then please do us a favor and write your question in the Q&A box right here inside of Zoom, okay? Our team is gonna be reading all of the questions that you guys post during the webinar as Dr. Garth is speaking, and we're gonna do our best to answer them at the end of the webinar for sure, okay? Now, before we go any further, in the chat box, please tell us your name and where you're from. We'd love to hear from you guys, so please don't be shy. So go ahead in the chat box, just tell us your name and where you're from, and let's take a look at what we got. Okay, we see people from Dallas, Texas, Scott. Oh boy, lots of people here, lots of people here. This is moving too fast, I can't even read this. Cincinnati, Ohio, San Francisco, Virginia Hill, okay, Illinois, Michigan, Louisiana, BC, New Zealand, Oregon. It looks like we have a truly international audience. This is fantastic. We got some from Kelowna, BC. Fantastic. Great. Keep them coming. Keep them coming. We want to see where you guys are from. Now, if you can see my video, my face right here, could you do me a favor and just write just type the number 1 into the chat box. That way we can make sure that we don't have any technical glitches. Okay, we see a lot of 1s. That's fantastic. Okay, in a second, Dr. Garth Davis will be turning on his camera, so you guys will get to see him as well. And clearly you guys can hear me, which is a fantastic thing too, so that's fantastic. Now, here's another thing I want you to do. If you are already plant-based, okay, in the chat box, write the word yes. If you are not plant-based, but maybe even considering going plant-based, write the word no, or you could write the word not yet. Let's see. Lots and lots and lots of yeses. Not yet, not yet, not yet. Yes, yes, yes. Looks like if I can, my eyes can read this quickly, it looks like most of you guys are actually saying yes. I'd say maybe 60 to 70% of you are yes, and some of you guys say no, and a lot of you guys are saying not yet, which is actually cool. So Dr. Garth Davis is gonna give us a lot of intro here into what's the benefit of going plant-based, and what's this problem that we have with consuming too much protein, and how can we actually solve that problem, okay? So for those of you who may not know me, my name is Cyrus Kambata. I have a PhD in nutritional biochemistry, and I have been living with type 1 diabetes for about 15 years now. I transitioned to a low-fat, plant-based whole food diet in 2003, which is 14 years ago at this point. And in this process, I've reduced my insulin use by more than 40%. And I've been able to increase my overall insulin sensitivity by almost 6-fold, which is kind of a big deal. On top of that, I got more energy than I know what to do with on a daily basis, and it's great because I love exercising and I get to do as much of that as I want. I'm the co-founder of Mastering Diabetes, which is an online group coaching program for people living with diabetes. And I'm gonna be your webinar host today. So Dr. Garth Davis, can you just start talking? If you guys can hear Dr. Garth as he talks, just write the word yes for us, please.
Hey, how you doing, Cyrus?
Cool, cool, good to see you, Dr. Garth. Okay, we got a lot of yes, so it looks like
you were vegan before vegan was cool, huh?
What's that?
You were vegan before vegan was cool.
I was vegan way before vegan was cool, yeah. And funny because at the time that I transitioned to vegan, I knew maybe one other person on the planet that actually was vegan. So
I didn't even know what
fun
it meant.
time.
I was 2007, and I didn't even know what vegan meant. That was like, is that kind of some kind of alien or something?
Yeah, exactly. And, I think, you're doing an awesome job of actually teaching a lot of people what does the term vegan mean, and, what does the term plant-based mean, and what's the reasoning behind it, right? Because You're brilliant. You have so much knowledge about the actual science of it, and you're going to do a great job, hopefully, of explaining that science so that most people can understand it here today. So for those of you who do not know Dr. Garth Davis, I'll give another intro here. Dr. Garth Davis is a physician and the medical director of the Davis Clinic at the Methodist Hospital in Houston, Texas. And he starred on the hit TV show on TLC called Big Medicine. He's certified by the American Board of Surgery, and he's a fellow of the American Board of Surgeons and a fellow of the American Society for Metabolic and Bariatric Surgery. Dr. Davis also competes in marathons and Ironman triathlons. And I had the pleasure of running a half marathon with him in Houston, had a fantastic time together. He's also the author of the book Proteinaholic, which if you've never read the book Proteinaholic, I highly, highly, highly recommend it. Go ahead and grab a copy and read it cover to cover. It's fascinating. There's a lot of really good information in there, but he also has a really good voice, and there's a lot of parts of the book which are actually quite humorous, and I appreciate that very much. So without further ado, thank you so much for being with us here today, Dr. Davis.
Well, thanks for having me. Excited to be here. This is a
Absolutely.
really interesting venue.
So it looks like we have a total of 700 participants here, and it's exactly 4:03 p.m. So how about I think a lot more people are going to be trickling in as time goes on, maybe over the course of the next 5 to 10 minutes or here. So, okay. So maybe if you want to share your screen and start the webinar, we can go through that. And then there's going to be a couple of polls. I'll just kind of cut you off in the middle and drop a couple questions in there, and we can just go from there.
All right. Is that working?
That looks great. You want to go full screen on that?
Yeah. Let me see if I could do this. Good.
Looks great.
All right. You want me to go ahead and just get started?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it.
Okay. Well, here we are on the internet because all my friends are vegan on the internet. In real life, it's a little harder. Cyrus, you could probably relate.
Oh, no doubt, no doubt.
Which is always good to see vegans live. I always like it when I do the big conferences. I get to see actual vegans. I don't see them much. So first, we're going to discuss the first rule of Vegan Club, which is to tell everybody about Vegan Club. And I say that because a lot of what I want to do here is get on a soapbox, but I also want to teach people about plant-based diets. A lot of the people out there are already plant-based, but they don't know what to tell their friends when they get that age-old question, where do you get your protein? So I'm going to kind of help you answer that question. These are my two little vegan converters. I got a call the other night by one of their families that go to school with them, and the mom was like, your kids are trying to teach my kids to be vegetarian. It's not going to happen. But slowly and surely they're doing that, and I want you guys to do that. And obviously there's many reasons to go plant-based. You kind of alluded to the fact that being vegan, you could be vegan for the animals, you could be vegan for the environment, you could be vegan for your health, you could be vegan for all three of these things like I am. But today we're just going to basically be talking about protein and how that affects health, and why a plant-based diet is the best diet because of the protein factors. And it's such an important topic nowadays because, you know, the number one health tip people get is to eat more protein. Every patient I see tells me that their doctor says, you got to eat more protein. You hear it all the time. Now, this is a big problem. And while we're talking about protein, I hate talking about macronutrients. So it seems a little bit odd to be talking about protein, but we're going to talk about protein so I can get you back to this idea that Mary Nestle talks about, which is the problem with nutrient by nutrient science is that it takes the nutrient out of context of the food out of context of the diet, and the diet out of context of the lifestyle. And that really messes things up, and it's a big problem with the way we look at food now. We don't even look at food as food. We look at it as protein or carbs. And look, I used to be a protein addict. All I ever thought about was, where am I getting my protein? Where's the protein? And now, thankfully, I got 99 problems, and protein just ain't one of them. Now, you did that poll before, and most of the people here are plant-based, so you would think I would be preaching to the choir, but I'm really not. Because I feel every time I meet a vegan, they kind of feel like they're martyrs, right? They feel like they're being vegan because they know it's good for the environment, and they know it's obviously good for the animals, but they get really worried that they're hurting their health in order to help the animals. And so they go and buy every form of vegan protein. All they ever talk about in the vegan sites is what vegan protein to use and what protein infusion to use. And this is all because they think that meat is the source of amino acids and that gives you muscle. And if you don't eat meat, you're not getting muscle. And so while most of America is having eggs and bacon, we're having tempeh bacon and tofu because we got to have protein to start our day. And then we may be having a veggie burger, and while they're having steak, we're having our own vegan substitute meat. And it's basically all stems from this thing that I call bro science, which is this idea that this guy right here he's developed his muscles because he's drinking a protein shake. Now, that's a crazy idea because he got there. First of all, he probably got there from doing steroids, but he also got there from lifting a lot of weights. The protein shake he was sold to. And the funny thing is the protein shakes that were sold to him to gain weight, we sell to people to lose weight. It's the same protein. And really, that's not what got this guy big. And you could, if you look at his legs, you could see that the protein isn't working down there because it looks like he skipped leg day. But, you know, protein's become the big thing. It's the sexy thing. And I used to think that too, back when I looked like this. I was constantly looking for protein. I was like, where's my protein? I need to get my protein so I could go to the gym, so I could get my muscles. This is me at 30 on a high protein diet, yet not looking very muscular. And you got to understand, I trained in one of the largest medical centers in the world. This is the Texas Medical Center. And the funny thing, this is one of the largest heart centers in the world. And down at the first floor of that heart center, there's a McDonald's where you could get your protein, and you'd see, you know, patients with their IV poles down there getting their McDonald's. We have the MD Anderson Cancer Center making cancer history as if they're getting rid of cancer, but they're actually spreading like a cancer through the medical center because cancer is not going away. It's actually getting worse. And when we become doctors, we say the Hippocratic Oath. And one thing I never knew is that Hippocrates had said, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. That's not part of the Hippocratic Oath we say when we become a doctor. And in fact, in medical school, we sit in these big, boring lectures, and we study things like this: the cell wall, the mitochondria, the Golgi body. But, you know, that has very little application in my day-to-day life as a doctor. We study a lot of effect, but we never study cause. And what we never study is nutrition. Doctors have a very, very, very basic, almost layperson understanding of nutrition. So anyway, I went into practice and I started the Davis Clinic because I had a lot of patients that needed weight loss, and I had gotten into weight loss therapy. Wrote a book, The Expert's Guide to Weight Loss. I hate this book. I mean, the surgery part of it's good, but in this book, I've got a nutrition part. And you can see I've got no gray hair there, so I haven't quite learned yet. At this point in my life, I thought everything was about the surgery. And I told people, you know, eat a 40% carb diet, 30% fat, 30% protein. Because I just, that's what I heard in the lay press. That was the zone diet. And I thought, yeah, well, that probably works. And that's in my book about weight loss, nutrition is a tiny little chapter in which I basically give these recommendations. And I was kind of taught and had this view through medical school that really we're born with a broken body. And it's my job as a doctor to put that body back together. And I could do it with my knife. I could do it with medications. And because that's what we think. We think that medications and knives are the answer to everything. So congratulations. Sounds like he needs a little Ritalin. I'll write it up for you. It's medications for everything that ails us. But over time, I started seeing something interesting. I started seeing that everybody had high blood pressure, and everybody had sleep apnea and heart disease and diabetes and cancer and irritable bowel syndrome. And of course, I was seeing tons of people battling with weight. And my poor patients, you know, people are like, well, they're just lazy. I mean, these people have been overweight since they were kids. They've gone to fat camps since they were younger. They've struggled to lose weight. There was a New York Times article that said everybody that has weight loss surgery should go on a high protein ketogenic diet. Every single one of my patients has done that, and yet they fail. And the interesting thing is, now that I know about diet, I might counsel a patient about eating more fruits and vegetables. And yet the one thing that comes up over and over is protein. So I might tell my patient, you know, for a snack, have an apple. And then I look at their food log a few days later, and did they eat an apple? No, they ate a Fiber One bar because it had protein in it. Because if it says it's got protein, it's got to be better. And if I ask them why they didn't eat the apple, they'd say, well, the apple doesn't have protein. And yet, when you look at everything in these protein shakes, there's all kinds of chemicals and things that we definitely don't need in our body. And even vegans are guilty of this. So what, if there's a vegan product that says protein, we'll buy it. This was one of my patients who, she'd come to see me for a long time, lost a ton of weight. And, we'd talked about all these things. And then one day she came back to see me and she'd been gaining back some weight. And I was like, what's in your purse? And I made her open her purse, and there was a protein bar, and I made her throw it away and told her she would be forever shamed. And so here she is. It's interesting, the concept, the whole psychology of it. And I could tell it best as a story from one of my patients, because one of my patients comes to see me, and she's originally from Ghana. And she comes to see me, and she's overweight, a very intelligent lady, actually works as a NASA scientist. And I say to her, why do you think you're overweight? And she says, because of the carbs. Now, I'm looking down, I have all my patients do a food log, and I'm looking at her food log, and there's no carbs in that food log. It's eggs, it's bacon, it's chicken. And so I say to her, but you aren't eating any carbs. And she says to me, well, once in a while I get with my friends that are from Ghana, and we have a typical Ghana meal. And a typical Ghana meal is very high in carbs. Now, there's lots of sweet potatoes, beans, plantains. And she said, and I said, that's what's making you fat? And she said, yeah, that's what it is. And I said, well, have you ever been to Ghana? She goes, yeah, I went last summer. I've been several times. And I said, are there any people in Ghana that are morbidly obese? And she said, well, actually, no. In fact, when I was there, I felt like I was the only person that was overweight. And then she starts thinking about it, and she's like, you know what? When I was there, I actually lost weight. And I said, don't you get it? The food from Ghana is not making you fat. It's these foods that you're eating now that are doing it. That's what's making you overweight. And I came to this realization quite unexpectedly. This is me right before I was going to get married. And you could see, if you look at my picture now, I look a little bit different. I was very chubby, a good 15 pounds more than I am now, maybe 20. And we were having our first child. And around the same time, I went to get an eye exam. And the eye doctor said, you've got cholesterol deposits all around your eyes. And this took me by surprise, because I thought, I'm telling people how to live healthy. How could I be sick? I'm eating lots of protein. And I went and got a life insurance policy, and I found out that I had hypertension, high cholesterol, and a fatty liver. And I was 35 years old. And, this just blew my mind, because I thought I knew what I was doing. I thought I knew what was right. And all of a sudden, I felt like a hypocrite. And it made me really think things over again. And I really started exploring health. Because before I told you, I kind of thought we were born with a broken body, and that the answer was surgery. And that if I was going to tell you what to eat, I'd say protein. But what I noticed is that in America, we eat more protein than just about any other country in the world. And yet, if you look at this graph right here, not only do we eat the most protein, we also eat the most animal-based protein. And if you had asked me years ago, if you're going to eat a protein, what kind would you eat? I would tell you an animal-based protein. So we eat the most protein, the most animal-based protein, and yet we have the shortest life expectancy. And this is despite having the best healthcare you could possibly get. And not only do we have the shortest life expectancy, we spend more on our health than any other country in the world, nearly twice the average that countries spend. And these are countries that have socialized medicine. And we don't even have socialized medicine. We're getting more and more overweight as the years go by, and we are leading the world, though the world is catching up with us. We have some of the most diabetes, some of the most cancer, and those numbers continue to rise. And this drove me crazy. I actually went a little bit nuts. I started believing that I had missed out on something in medical school. And I started studying nutrition and health like crazy. This was my dining room. There were no more dining room parties with steaks being served, as I sat down and looked at every bit of available literature to see what was the right way to eat. And what are these countries doing that are living longer than us and that are healthier than us? And the conclusion I came to is well encapsulated in this opinion, in this quote here. People are fed by the food industry, which pays no attention to health, and they're treated by a health industry, which pays no attention to food. And if you don't believe that, look at this. This is the choose my plate from the government. And you can see that they suggest we eat half our plate from fruits and vegetables, a quarter of our plate from grains, and then a quarter from protein, though they say some of that protein could be vegetable protein. And then, of course, there's that dairy, and you know how that gets there. You grease a few hands, and you got to drink some dairy. Now, that's what they tell us we should eat. But now look at what they spend their money on. Almost all their money is spent on meat and dairy. That money that's spent on grains over there is to feed our meat and dairy. And look how much money we spend on fruit and vegetables. Remember, fruit and vegetables should be half our plate, but it's 1% of our expenditure in our food bills. And so I started deciding I'm going to think outside the box with the way I approach my health, the health of my family, and the health of my patients. And I had to rethink everything. So what comes with a steak? Cancer, heart disease, your choice of rice pilaf, and a baked potato. And I wrote the book Proteinaholic. And then in that book, I try to answer all these questions that we get about protein. The book is about as well researched as you could get. I mean, I look at some of these ridiculous books about health out there, like Wheat Belly, that have almost no research in there, and all the research is really, really bad research. I really tried not to do that with this book. And I wanted to answer some of the questions, like a question you may get. You say, well, I was at the store the other day and I was going to buy some vegetables, but then I realized that lions eat meat. So I put the vegetables back and I had to buy meat instead because basically I'm a lion when you think about it. We think we're carnivores. I hear this all the time, but we're carnivores. You know, we're carnivores like a lion, which is always ridiculous to me because we are nothing like a lion. You know, we do not have carnivorous teeth. Our mouth goes back and forth to masticate, to break down plant particles. We have amylase in our saliva to break down starches. We can't claw an animal as it runs by. We don't look at roadkill and get hungry. And when you think about it, animals are perfectly designed for their environment. Like a giraffe is designed to eat leaves and an anteater to get ants. And humans are actually perfectly designed to eat certain foods. And what we're perfectly designed to eat is actually fruit. We are most in common with the monkeys that eat fruit. Now, a lot of people say, well, they will eat other monkeys, like apes will eat other monkeys. They do that only under starvation. And in fact, a great study in the Congo showed that apes basically will eat fruit exclusively if they have enough fruit to eat. But our GI system, our enzyme system, our anatomy is all extremely different than that of a carnivore. And when you think of it, the longest lived, largest mammals out there are all plant-based. I mean, this guy here, he's vegetarian, unless you piss him off. This guy is vegetarian. And in fact, there's athletes that are vegetarian. This is something else. There's a movie coming out called Game Changers and another one called From the Ground Up that kind of look at some of these plant-based athletes that have been thriving on plant-based proteins, which you would have never thought possible in the past, and we're now proven this theory that you can't build muscle with plant-based protein to be completely wrong. When I first was going vegan, I kind of figured this is what I was going to look like, but really this is what vegans look like nowadays, and it's completely different than what we thought they did. And one of the studies that really was interesting to me was the blue zones, because the Blue Zones was an interesting study by Dan Buettner in National Geographic, where they went around the world looking for the healthiest cultures. I mean, if we're the most unhealthy culture in the world, what are the healthiest people in the world doing? And so lessons for living longer. Who has the most centenarians, people living over 100? Now, you might stop and say, well, I don't even want to live over 100 because this is our concept of 100. But when they did this study, what they found is over 100 look completely different. You go to these blue zones and over 100, these people are still an active part of society. They're still the matriarchs and the patriarchs. They're still enjoying life. They're not in old age homes. They're living long, healthy lives. And if you look at one of the blue zones like Okinawa, you'll see that they're not thriving on protein. In fact, the vast majority of their calories come from carbohydrates. They eat mainly purple yams. They also eat rice. And if you look over here, you could see that their protein content is only about 9% of the food they eat. And a lot of that is coming from vegetables and soy, edamame, and some legumes. And you could see over time that the traditional Okinawan diet, people actually lose weight as they get older, which is much different than us as we gain weight as we get older. Now you can see that Okinawa is changing, unfortunately, because we're starting to move our food over to them. And unfortunately, our food brings a lot of problems with it, and they're losing their longevity because of that. If you go over to Sardinia, you see these guys in Sardinia living these long, healthy lives. They too have about a protein content of about 9% of their calories. The vast majority of their food, again, comes from carbohydrates. They don't eat a lot of chicken. Most of their food is coming from fruits, vegetables, beans, and grains. The Seventh-day Adventists are really fascinating to me. And the reason being is that the Seventh-day Adventists are a heterogeneous group of people. You got genes from all over the place. They live around the world, but there are studies done in Loma Linda, California, where they live in a very similar environment. Most of them follow what they call the Daniel diet, which is to say they are vegan. They are plant-based, but there's different degrees of plant-based. So you've got people that eat just a little bit of meat. You got people that are lacto-ovo-vegetarian, and you got people that are vegan, and they've studied these people for many years. The vegan Seventh-day Adventists are the healthiest, longest-lived population in the entire world. And when you look at all these different blue zones that are out there, you'll see they have certain things in common. They don't smoke, they get exercise, but one of the main things is that they follow a plant-based diet and they eat a lot of legumes. And when you look at the Seventh-day Adventist studies, they're fascinating to me because the vegan population weighs less than the lacto-ovo-vegetarian population, which weighs less than the pesco-vegetarian, and on and on and on. And when you look at the type 2 diabetes, you can see there's a tremendous decrease in type 2 diabetes in the vegan population. And in fact, the odds of getting diabetes as a vegan is much less than that of a non-vegetarian. And keep in mind, these non-vegetarians are non-smoking, low-meat eating non-vegetarians. They're actually much healthier than the average American. And this kind of pattern follows for heart disease and heart attacks, and it also follows for cancer. And so the authors have concluded that in this large American cohort, vegetarian diets and similar diets with reduced meat consumption are associated with lower risk of death and should be considered carefully by individuals as they make dietary choices and by those offering dietary guidance. Now, a lot of people criticize science, and we need to stop and talk about science because science could be, as you probably know, very well manipulated. So people say, well, that study is a correlation study. It's not a causation study. And that's true. But in my book, you will see I have got many, many, many of those studies. And where there's smoke, there's probably fire. And you may see things like butter is good for you. And let me show you how people manipulate studies to confuse you. They'll say, well, you tell me that fats are bad for me, but I'll tell you that butter is good for you. Well, we're going to talk about heart disease because they're saying that butter doesn't cause heart disease. But we do know that animal fat is very strongly related with colon cancer and breast cancer. But we also know that it's strongly correlated with heart disease, very strongly correlated with heart disease. We know as dietary cholesterol increases, your serum cholesterol increases, and as your saturated fatty acids go up, your LDL goes up. And I could predict the rise in LDL just by the amount of saturated fatty acids you take. And as your LDL goes up, so does your coronary heart disease. And if that's true with all these different trials, then how can butter possibly be bad? How could it possibly be that butter is good for you? Well, all of the studies that are showing that butter may be good for you are in fact funded by the companies that bring you butter and the eggs and the dairy industries and things like that. And one of the main studies that was out there, it's called the Siri Torino study. It was the first study that really got people saying saturated fat is okay for you. That study never showed saturated fat was good for you. What it showed is that saturated fat may not be causing heart disease. Now, they did a little trick in that study. It's called over-adjustment bias. And what they did in that study is they basically took out everybody with high cholesterol because they said high cholesterol is an independent cause of heart disease. So they wanted to see how saturated fat, if saturated fat caused heart disease, but they removed everybody with high cholesterol. Now, the problem there is that saturated fat causes heart disease by raising cholesterol. That's called an over-adjustment bias. It's a real little trick that they did to make their data prove their point, but their point was proved erroneously. There's all kinds of ways to manipulate data. If you ignore all the stuff on the outside of the slide and just look at the middle, they wanted to see, there's two different studies, and they wanted to see in these two different studies, one, they put people in ketosis, the other one, people weren't in ketosis, and they wanted to see who burnt more fat during exercise. And you could see in study 2, the people that were in ketosis burned more fat when they exercise. And you say, well, wow, if I'm burning more fat when I'm in ketosis, then I'm going to go into ketosis. But if you don't know the details of the studies, then you don't realize how bogus this slide is. Because if you now look at the outside, you could see in the first study, they looked at 300 people. In the second study, there was only 5 people. In the first study, they exercised for 15 to 30 minutes. In the second study, it was 2.5 hours. And on and on and on. These are completely apple and oranges studies, and they cannot be compared together. And yet this slide showed up to tell people to go into ketosis. There was a study many years ago comparing these different diets. The Ornish diet is a plant-based diet, and you could see there that the Ornish diet did not do as well as the Atkins diet, though none of these diets did very well. People lost weight, but then gained it all back. But you could ask, well, how did the plant-based diet not do well? Very simply, they never did a plant-based diet. In fact, the people that were on the Ornish diet only ate 20 grams of fiber a day. They dropped their saturated fat from 35% to 30%. Dr. Ornish recommends way lower than that, at least less than 20%. And so they were never on an Ornish diet. I mean, a fiber content of 20 grams and a saturated fat content of 30% is in no way an Ornish diet. And this graph is just basically nonsense. You guys might know Gary Taubes. He always talks about how great it is to eat a whole bunch of animal protein. And he published his data to try to show that his cholesterol level hadn't gone up. What he didn't realize is that his CO2 was at 19. He's not a doctor, even though he gives keynote lectures to doctors. And he doesn't realize that a CO2 of 19 means he's in metabolic acidosis. He's in metabolic acidosis because he's eating a lot of animal protein, which is very high in sulfur-containing amino acids, causes acidosis, which causes real big problems with muscle and bone health. And but he doesn't know these things because he's just not an expert in these fields, even though he's giving out recommendations to people to what to eat. Why is meat bad for you? I mean, I could go on and on and on. Is it the saturated fat that increases cholesterol or that causes you to absorb endotoxin in the animal protein? Is it the increase in insulin? Is it the N-nitrosamines, the heterocyclic amines from when you burn the meat? Is it the increased calorie density? Is it the heme iron that causes oxidative stress? The TMAO, the microflora that changes? The increase in IGF-1, it goes on and on and on. There are many different factors about eating animal protein that leads to disease processes. We know recently that the World Health Organization has labeled processed meat as a class 1 carcinogen. And again, class 1 includes tobacco and plutonium and arsenic. Red meat is probably carcinogenic. It's a 2A. And there's been many studies looking at this. They've done multiple meta-analyses looking at that. You can see the overall cancer incidence is significantly lower in vegetarians compared to meat eaters. If you look at the EPIC study, which followed 500,000 people for over 12 years, which is the largest study ever looking at food and health, and you could see all these different cancers, that the risk of getting these cancers are increased with both processed and unprocessed meats. In this EPIC Panacea study, in one of the consortiums, they took the data together and they said, if you eat 5 servings of fruit and vegetables a day, you get 4 extra years, healthy years of life. If you don't smoke, that gives you another 5 years. If you do moderate exercise, that gives you 3 years. If you do all 3, that gives you 10. And if you don't drink alcohol in excess, that gives you 14 years. 14 years of increased healthy life. In America, only 3% of our population follows these very, very simple recommendations. And that's crazy. And we really ought to be focusing on that given our medical healthcare crisis. And if you look at America, you know, if I'm going to prove to you using science, I can't just show one study. All right, I got to show you multiple studies. So let's look how I would prove to you that animal protein is related to prostate cancer. Now, if you look in the world, America eats the most protein and we've got the most prostate cancer, but that's not enough to prove anything. So you could then do a prospective study where you do what's called a multivariate regression analysis. You try to eliminate other things that might be causing the prostate cancer. They did this with 47,000 healthcare professionals, followed over many years, and they found that if you had 2 servings a day of milk, you increased your prostate cancer risk by 60%. 60%. That is unbelievable. Now, I still haven't proved anything yet. This is still correlation. It's not causation. But I now have a pretty good idea that there could be a theory that this works. So then I could test it. And Dr. Ornish did this. He took people with rising PSAs that were already up into the prostate cancer level. He put half of them on a plant-based diet, and half of them did not go on a plant-based diet. And you can see the group that did not, their PSA rose, and actually they had to proceed to typical therapy, whereas the other group, you could see a dramatic drop in their PSA. He did something very interestingly. He took the blood of the people on a plant-based diet and dropped it on an agar with prostate cancer cells and showed that it killed 70% of the cells, whereas if he took the blood of the people just on a regular diet, it only killed 9%, which is a tremendous difference. The blood is now actually changed to where it actually attacks prostate cancer cells. And he also showed, believe it or not, in conjunction with Nobel laureate Elizabeth Blackburn, that the telomere, the actual cap of the chromosome in these people, actually increased. That's crazy. We used to think that telomeres were stable, that you couldn't affect them. We know that lifestyle intervention now can actually lengthen telomeres, stabilize your chromosomes, and possibly help prevent cancer. When we start looking at weight, it is very, very clear, whether you're looking at EPIC data, whether you're looking at the Advanced Health Studies data, whether you're looking at the Harvard studies, that plant-based diets are associated with lower weight over time. There's been many different meta-analyses looking at this. Plant-based diets have some of the highest weight loss seen in any studies, especially given the fact that these plant-based diets are not calorie controlled. In all of these studies, they're not telling people to calorie control or calorie count. They say eat as much plants and fruits and vegetables as you want, and we see very, very good weight loss. You might ask, why is this? And it's because of calorie density. You could eat a lot of fruits and vegetables and fill up your stomach. There's stretch receptors in the stomach that get stretched by the fruit and vegetables, the fiber and the water, and that sends a signal to your brain to tell you that you're full. Whereas you don't get that as much with the more high calorie density foods. I use this chart a lot with my patients and try to tell them to eat below a 600 calorie density and give them examples of what that is. In the EPIC study, it was very interesting, where they followed 500,000 people. Animal protein was definitely associated with weight gain over time, and the food most associated with weight gain over time, funny enough, was chicken. And that's strange because we think of chicken as our health food. Why is that? I'm not exactly sure why it would be chicken, but this might give you an idea. They used to slaughter chickens at 68 days and they look like this. Now they're slaughtering them at 47 days and they look like this. They're fattening these chickens up, and these chickens are then fattening us up. These are what chickens grow in. These are cage-free chickens stuffed together. They get diseases, they get endotoxins in them from these diseases. They eat an unhealthy diet, they don't move, and they are fatter. And if you look, our beef consumption has gone down, but our poultry consumption has gone up. Interestingly, in the EPIC study, poultry consumption is also associated with lymphoma risk. And you can see that as our chicken content has gone up, so has our lymphoma rates in America. Another big thing we know about animal protein is it's strongly correlated with diabetes. It's also correlated with stroke and ischemia, but diabetes is a strong one. And there's many reasons for this. And interestingly, it's very associated with animal protein, but not with vegetable protein. So you can increase your vegetable protein consumption, but it doesn't seem to affect the diabetes as much as animal protein consumption does. There's reasons for this, and one of them has to do with something called intramyocellular lipid. The fats that come with animal fat get into your muscle cells. Some of the animal proteins help the fat get into the muscle cells. When they get in there, they block the insulin, the production of insulin receptors. If you don't have insulin receptors, you can't get sugar into your cells, so your sugars rise, and then you get diabetes. But diabetes is not caused by sugar or by carbs. It's caused by the fat. In the EPIC study, they showed that the more fructose you ate, the less diabetes you had. And if you take just 5% of your saturated fat and substitute it with fructose, you decrease your diabetes by 30%. That's a crazy amount. And so the starches and the sugars and the fructose, they are not causing diabetes. And this, you can see this all over the world. If you go to China, where they never had or had very little diabetes, they're now eating a lot more meat, and they're getting a lot more diabetes. Their meat consumption has gone up dramatically. If you look at places like the Pima Indians have the highest concentration of diabetics in the world. What's interesting is the Pima Indians used to live on rivers in Arizona, and they had no diabetes. They ate starches, grains, corn, healthy. We dammed their rivers, and once we dammed the rivers, they couldn't grow their produce anymore. And after that, we gave them food subsidies, which includes spam and meat and processed carbs, and now they have one of the highest rates of diabetes. What's interesting is the Mexican Pima have very low rates of diabetes, but the same genes, and they're eating a more traditional plant-based diet that the old Pima used to eat. Dr. Neil Barnard put this to the test. He took a group of people that were diabetic, and he put half of them on a vegan diet, ad-lib feeding. Again, you can eat as much of this as you want. For breakfast, he gave them oatmeal with raisins, can you believe that? And some toast, vegetarian chili over brown rice. A snack was a banana, which to most diabetic doctors would be heresy, but you know, he did it, and he gave people pasta with marinara. And you know what happened? They did great, because these kind of foods, people think fruit's bad for diabetes. Fruit decreases your risk of diabetes. Cereal fibers decrease your risk of diabetes. And in the study, the blue line is the vegan group, and you can see over 22 weeks, their A1C, which is a measure of diabetes, went down much more than the control group. The control group was on the ADA diet, which is the typical lower carb diet that diabetic patients are put on. There's been so many studies that have looked at this a long time. Harvard's been studying this for a while. You could see in the Nurses' Health Study that they follow people for 9 years, and they found that a diet lowest in red and processed meat and sugar and highest in whole grains, fruits, vegetables decreased the risk of dying from heart disease by 40%. That is an amazing amount, almost half. And that's the number one killer of Americans. You could see in these meta-analyses that the overall risk of death drops dramatically with plant-based diets. Dr. Ornish proved this when he showed that you could actually, and so did Dr. Esselstyn, that you could actually reverse heart disease. This is a before. You could see that heart vessel, it's all ratty with plaque in it, gets completely better on a whole food plant-based diet. And what Dr. Ornish says, I totally agree with. What really keeps them on fire is we have an epidemic of disease in this country that doesn't need to exist. It's so ridiculously simplistic to turn this epidemic around. But this is how people are. You've got heart failure. At least I'm not dying of protein deficiency like those vegan hippies. I'll tell a patient, you know, I could cut your stomach open, rearrange your intestines, or I could put you on a plant-based diet, and the vast majority will choose the former. And you know, when I talk to doctors about this, they're almost perplexed when I show them this data. They don't know the science, which I didn't know, that I've studied and put in Proteinaholic. I went to the American Society of Bariatric Physicians, which is a group of doctors that help people lose weight. This is what they were recommending people do to lose weight. Eat eggs and bacon for breakfast, a chicken Caesar salad, or a fast food burger without the bun, because God knows it's the bun that's causing the problem. Snacking on olives and cheese sticks, and then eat steak for dinner. It's absolutely crazy. Makes me want to pull my hair out. They always refer to Weston Price, which is crazy because Weston Price, he was a dentist. He went around the world, saw that we have dental caries here, but in parts of the world where they weren't eating processed food, they didn't have dental caries. He never said much about the fact that you shouldn't be eating meat and not go vegan. He didn't really address those things. They always refer to the Maasai because the Maasai eat a very high animal protein diet and they don't have heart disease, but the Maasai walk thousands of miles a day. They die at an average age of 45. They're not dying of heart disease or cancer. They're, dying of lion attack and, infectious disease. But an interesting thing, they did an autopsy study and they found that these guys actually did have heart disease. They just were dying too young to express that heart disease. You always hear, what about Eskimos, the Inuits? They eat a lot of animal food and they're not sick. I don't know where that even got started. They're actually very sick. They are not healthy people. They do have heart disease and they do have diabetes. You could look at many different populations and compare them. So for instance, the Mongolian Kyrgyz have the same genes as the Siberians. The Siberians eat a predominantly potato diet, very lean, very healthy. The Kyrgyz are eating grass-fed, natural meat, and they were much more overweight, had much more heart disease. You would think the gauchos of Argentina would be healthy because they've got the leanest grass-fed meat in the world, and yet they've got some of the highest colon cancer rates. In Tunisia's interesting. Tunisia was an extremely healthy country, given their poverty levels. They had the Bedouin there that ate mainly a wheat-based diet. They struck oil. They got a lot of meat. As they got meat, they got extremely overweight. As they got overweight, they got heart disease, and their health has completely changed since that phenomenon. Dr. Burkett's a really interesting fellow. He's a general surgeon like myself, so he's in London. This is fascinating because I see, diverticulitis, cholecystitis, appendicitis every day, and heart disease, and so did he. Now, he noticed that there was an expatriate Ugandan population that he was treating. And this population had the same diseases as the Anglo-Saxons. So he wondered if he went to Uganda, would they in fact have the same diseases that he's seeing in the Ugandans in London? And as you may guess, they did not. And he tried to study why did they not? And what he did, he finally came to the conclusion that part of the problem was they didn't have any constipation. And he really started looking into fiber. And he found that the fiber in the Ugandan diet was upwards of 60 grams a day, whereas the fiber in the Ugandan in London was about 12 grams of fiber a day, which is what we're seeing in our American population now. And he concluded that if we could just increase fiber, we would get rid of most of the diseases we treat. And so he asked us questions of doctors. Are you a floor mopper or a tap turner off? So he basically looked at Western disease and Western medicine as we're mopping the floor instead of turning off the faucet. This really played a lot in my mind as I started to think about this. Where do we even get this concept that we need to eat protein? Where do we get the name protein? Well, Carl von Voigt started looking at tissues under a microscope. He found the structure of protein, said our tissues are made of protein, therefore we should eat protein. How much protein? Well, he measured how much protein some construction workers were eating. That was about 120 grams a day, so that's what he said. No one back then was even thinking about, obesity. In fact, being overweight was a sign of success. It meant you were, getting food and you were able to eat and you were rich. There was a guy named Russell Chittenden at Yale who tried to prove that you don't need that much protein. He tested athletes and showed you only need 60 grams of fibers a day. This is from a New York Times article in 1907 that showed that actually people that were foreign-born that were starting to eat animals were starting to get cancer. But the real problem came with the Industrial Revolution, and that's when we stopped eating ma and pa's food. And we started getting overweight and we started getting heart disease. And in the 1970s, we tried to decide why. And we had the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition. They met, they got together, and they said the problem is that we're eating too much meat and too much animal protein, and we should be eating complex carbs. Well, the industry didn't like this. They got the committee disbanded. They got all their recommendations taken away. And in fact, one of the recommendations to eat less meat was changed to eat more lean meat. So from don't eat meat to eat more lean meat. Then we started talking about fat, carbs. That's when we really stopped talking about food. All we talked about was protein, carbs, and fat. And then we got the reduced fat Oreo because of that. We went on the reduced fat craze. We never actually, people said, well, we tried low fat, it didn't work. No, we didn't. We never tried low fat. We've always been eating fat. We've actually eaten more fat than we ate back then. We just eat more calories altogether. But there's this constant low carb, low fat debate. And while we're arguing shit, is it carbs that are bad or is it fat that it's bad? We all seem to agree that protein is good. We put protein up on a pedestal. Dr. Atkins really popularized that. Despite all the side effects of the Atkins diet, he had people doing it all the time. And the sad thing is, it works for a short period of time because you get nauseous and you can't eat a lot and you lose a lot of water weight. But everybody falls off of it. Dr. Nathan Pritikin he wasn't a doctor. He was diagnosed with heart disease, decided he would study just like I did, how to get rid of it, decided it was plant-based diets, went on a plant-based diet, got rid of his heart disease. When he died, he actually donated his heart to the Johns Hopkins for autopsy. He wanted to publish in the New England Journal of Medicine, and they couldn't find any sign of heart disease in it. Dr. Walter Kempner had the most successful diet that's ever really been studied. He put people on the rice diet. He put them on rice and fruit, and he had some of the most amazing examples of weight loss and treatment of hypertension and diabetes. He would have been more popular. However, he lost his medical license because he tended to whip his patients with a whip if they ate anything but fruit and rice, which is not good. Though he does say, to his defense, that they asked for it. It still did not fly with the North Carolina Medical Board. But anyway, now we're just in this media craziness over meat, and it's sponsored by meat. The government gives the meat, dairy, and egg industry money to actually advertise meat. And we now think that meat is good because it has protein in it, and protein's good. I mean, here's a vodka that advertises that they got protein in their vodka and that you're going to get abs because you drink it. It's absolutely crazy. It's brought along the paleo diet, which is completely crazy to me. This idea that paleo man ate nothing but brontosaurus burgers is just preposterous. And I can tell you for sure they weren't eating the paleo bar. The funny thing about all the people that talk about a paleo diet, none of them are actually anthropologists. If you actually read what an anthropologist says about a paleo diet, they'll tell you that the paleo diet people are leading a paleo fantasy. That paleo man, that first of all, we have evolved since paleo man. And that when you look at Australopithecus, a 300,000-year-old fossil, you could see that the food that they actually ate was mainly plants. And that leads us, of course, to the question you all want to know: how much protein do we really need? Well, this is what they say. The RDA recommends 13 for children 1 to 3, 19 4 to 8, 34 9 to 13. For an adult male, it's about 56 grams a day. For adult female, it's 46 grams a day. Now, what you got to know is that's actually the optimal level. So when they came up with those levels, they used a normal curve. So the vast majority of people need a lot less than that. But they wanted to make sure that they didn't miss out on anybody. So that was actually the upper level. That's 2 standard deviations above the mean of what people need. So probably people need a lot less than that. But to be safe, we say 56 grams for a male, 46 grams for a female. And you can see that all these plant-based vegans are hardly malnourished, even though people say that. There's all kinds of athletes now that are going plant-based. This is Mr. Universe. You can see he's not hurting from his plant-based diet. The only male American Olympian in the weightlifting in the last Summer Olympics was vegan. And yet we still get this question: where do you get your protein? People are always asking, where do you get your protein? And it's the sickest people asking me, where did I get my protein? And of course, in my hospital, this is the protein deficiency wing of the hospital. The fact of the matter is, I have never in all my medical career seen someone who was protein deficient without having some kind of other illness and being calorie deficient. If you're calorie deficient, you can be protein deficient. If you're eating adequate calories, it's very hard to be protein deficient because protein is important. We need to get protein. But in fact, protein is so important that nature's put it everywhere. Protein's everywhere. The amino acids of protein are actually in fruits. And in fact, your body has a constant labile supply of proteins. We used to believe that there were certain foods that were not complete proteins. They didn't have all the amino acids you needed. Well, all the foods have all the amino acids. They just have it in varying degrees. But you know, your body actually recycles protein constantly. Our cells are breaking down constantly, and we recycle those amino acids. So we have a labile supply of amino acids. Your body constantly has amino acids available to make a complete protein. We dump upwards of 90 grams of protein into our bowels every single day as we shed the lining of our intestines. People eat meat and think they'll become strong as an ox, forgetting that an ox eats meats. All essential amino acids come from plants. The plants have the essential amino acids. The ox eats it and turns it to muscle, and then people eat the muscle, but they're getting it from the plants. So when I'm at the gym and I'm wearing my vegan t-shirt and someone says, "Where do you get your protein from?" I tell them I get it from fruits and vegetables. So many vegetables have amino acids in it. You could get protein from spinach, from cauliflower, from cucumbers, tomatoes, mushrooms, kale, and of course the real high-value protein comes in the legumes, the black beans and the lentils, hummus. Thank God for hummus and pumpkin seeds. Tofu is a complete protein loaded. Dr. Gardner from Stanford did a pretty interesting study. He looked at people on a typical standard American diet, and he calculated how many grams of protein they got and what their amino acids were. So here's a standard American diet. You could see this person's eating 125 grams of protein. He then looked at his plant-based diet and what he ate in a day. You could see he had oatmeal, a stack of some nuts, a salad, some chocolate, some soup with some whole grain bread, and some more chocolate. And you could see that he got 78 grams of protein, which is in excess, of course, of that 56 grams that you need. And you could see he got more than enough of every single amino acid that the body requires. And it's not just that. It's not just that he's getting enough protein. You could see if you compare that, if he was to eat one bowl of lentils, he would get just as much protein as he got eating a piece of cow, but he wouldn't get any saturated fat, endotoxin, heterocyclic amine, and he would get a lot more calcium, iron, magnesium, and all the other nutrients that our bodies need, which is why I tell people, give peas a chance. It drives me crazy when people, when you eat fruits and vegetables and people ask me if that's healthy. I mean, here are my daughters sitting there eating nothing but a big bowl of crudité, and they're going to be sitting next to their friend eating their double cheeseburger, and my friend will say, "Aren't you worried about your kid's health? My kid's eating this, his kid's eating this." It's absolutely crazy, but that's what the concept is. I will tell you that eating a plant-based diet completely changed my health. It made me into an athlete. It made me feel better than I've ever felt before. And it's worked tremendously with my patients. Here's one of my patients. He is a surgery patient, but he was weighing 500 pounds. He told me he would do anything I told him to do after surgery, and I said, anything. So I made him go plant-based, and here we are crossing a finish line of a triathlon. And you could see he's a completely total different person now, eating a plant-based diet. And so there's a lot of information out there, and I know it's really hard for people. It's information overload. I hope that I've given you some knowledge to tie this all together, and then that you could conclude this with some wisdom, which is stop worrying about protein. Stop worrying about protein. Just eat the fruits and vegetables and choose life, not death. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dr. Davis. That was an awesome presentation.
Thanks.
I love listening to you talk. I've actually seen you talk, I think, 4 times in person now, and now, 5th time on a webinar here.
Yeah.
And every time I listen to you talk, it always reminds me just how excellent your command of the literature really is. Because, just like you're saying, you read a lot of books out there that claim to be evidence-based, but in reality, they're not.
Oh, they're not.
And it's really unfortunate that there's a lot of non-evidence-based science that's floating around that's actually convincing people to eat otherwise.
Right.
And yeah, this whole idea that eat more protein is the solution to the problems is just fraught with problems, right? It increases your risk for chronic diseases, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, just to name a few of them. So
yeah, it's fascinating. So the worlds are kind of merging together in the science. The anti-aging literature is now becoming very anti-protein. And so what's found is that You know, all the bodybuilders, they're really big into leucine. Everybody's supplementing leucine because it does stimulate muscle protein synthesis. But we also know it activates something called mTOR, which leads to aging. It also stimulates IGF-1, which we know leads to cancer. And so in the anti-aging literature, they're now showing that you really need to cut back on protein, and that possibly, you've always heard calorie restriction leads to long life. It may not be calorie restriction. It may actually be leucine restriction that may lead to a long, healthy life.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there's actually some studies that I've read that talk about the effect of methionine restriction as well. Given methionine.
Yeah, because cancer cells have to thrive on methionine. They need methionine. If you could take away methionine, the cancer cell can't thrive. And plus, methionine is a sulfur-containing amino acid, which leads to acid.
Bingo. Yep, you nailed it. So you probably weren't paying attention to this, but during the presentation, the chat box was going crazy. And we want to be able to answer as many of those questions as possible. So we're going to go to Q&A. But before we get there, I want to tell you about the Forks Over Knives Meal Planner. I've been using the Forks Over Knives Meal Planner myself, and I've been recommending it to all of my clients living with diabetes because it's an incredibly useful tool, and it really simplifies the idea of prepping food in a short period of time that's truly incredibly healthy. So we have the meal planner on a 20% discount. So what I want to do is actually show you guys what it looks like on the inside. So let's take a look at what it looks like on the inside, and then we can take it from there. We'll go into questions right after that. All right, can you see my screen? Yep, cool, okay. All right, so let me show you exactly how this meal planner functions because it's really, really cool actually. Okay, so the first thing that you're gonna do is basically create an account. It's completely free and there's no credit card required to try a free week. Simply tell us how many people are in your family and whether you have any food intolerances. I don't, so I'm just gonna click create first plan. Now, the first thing that you'll see is your meal planning dashboard. Every week, our team of chefs sends you a 5-day meal plan, including delicious plant-based recipes. They can all be prepared within 35 minutes or less. So let's say I have an early meeting tomorrow and I want to get rid of my breakfast. I can just click to remove it. It also allows me to swap out any recipe for hundreds of others in the archive. So if I'm not really feeling like black bean burgers, no problem. I can just choose swap. So I can type in the ingredients that I have in the fridge. So here I'm going to type in tomatoes, basil, and yep, pizza. So now I can take pesto pizza and add it to my plan. And in fact, I want to have it for dinner, so I simply just drag and drop that into place. Now, the wonderful thing is that the meal planner auto-generates my grocery list and my weekend prep cheat sheet. So let's jump into the grocery list here. Here I can check off items that I already have at home, and then I can access the meal planner on my phone or on a tablet while I'm shopping at the store. And you'll see here that we try and group items together so that you can minimize the number of things that you actually have to shop for. And then when it comes to your actual weekend prep, one of the features that I think actually really sets this meal planner apart from all the others is that this weekend prep cheat sheet guides you through the process of batch cooking everything that you'll need for the week ahead. And that simplifies your food prep big time. So, you know, this literally allows you to throw meals together and save yourself a lot of time. And then with one click, I can print everything out into a handy PDF, and it's just that simple. So there's plenty more to explore here, but hopefully this gives you an insight into how this meal planner functions. And if you guys are interested in using it, we highly recommend using it, obviously. You can get your first week's meal plan for free. And what you do is you go to the URL, www.forksoverknives.com/go-plants. We'll put that on the screen in 1 second. And the special bonus that we have for you today for being here as part of the webinar is that if you sign up for the meal planner today, you can receive 20% off of any subscription if you choose to become a premium member within the first 48 hours. So again, I highly recommend it. I use it for all my clients living with diabetes, and they love it and I love it. It's kind of a no-brainer. Okay, so Dr. Davis, can you put up your screen share here with the URL? Do you have a slide that has the Go Plants URL on it? Maybe I can do that on my end.
No, I can't. What happened to my slides?
On the presentation itself. Here we go. I think I can do it. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, here we go. So hopefully you guys can see this. This is the URL that you can go to, forksoverknives.com/go plants. Go there, sign up, get your first week's meal plan for free. And then again, if you sign up within the first 48 hours for premium subscription, you can save 20%. Okay, so here's a bunch of questions. I'll kind of run you through them and let's see what we got here. Scarlett Ash, she says, I've heard a lot of people say that their body craves protein. So what are they actually craving when they say that?
The one thing I've seen is that when people go to a plant-based diet, but they keep some of their common misconceptions about dieting with them. So they're so used to, for instance, portion control. And they also think that a plant-based diet has to be nothing but fruits and vegetables. Like they're going to eat a salad for every meal. So what they're craving is calories. They end up going on an extremely low-calorie diet, and they're portion controlling those calories. So they're basically starving themselves. And so they're extremely hungry. They're not craving protein per se, they're craving calories. The other thing that happens is, there's the mental aspect of it. It's the behavioral. They've had, in America, we have animal protein at every single meal.
Right.
But now they're going to switch that up. And if they don't, if they're not getting an animal protein at every single meal, they're going to start to think, oh my God, I missed that animal protein. Now, if they were eating the absolutely delicious meals that you and I eat on a day-to-day basis, they wouldn't miss it. If they were following just the 1 week you showed right there, if they were following that, there's no way they would be craving meat. But they're craving meat because they don't know the variety to cook, and all they're doing is eating like fruits and vegetables or a veggie burger here and there, and they're basically have no variety, no taste, and no calories. And that makes them think that they're craving protein.
Okay, perfect. So let's play devil's advocate here. You say that, they're calorie restricted. So if somebody wanted to actually give this a good shot, what are some of give us maybe like 3 or 4 calorie dense plant-based options that people can add to their diets to make sure that they're not calorie restricted?
I mean, the key to me is starches. Right?
Yeah.
I think, and I say that for many reasons. I mean, starches are more calorie dense than fruits and vegetables are. They don't have as much of fruit and as much water content. But also, if you look at the blue zones, at the healthiest populations of the world, they're all starch based. They all have a starch as a base. And we've seen this in athletes. They do a lot of starches too, because that's a great fuel. Those starches are great fuel for the body. There was a great study done by Halt where he had people eat all kinds of different foods, and he was measuring how satiated they were and how much they ate at the next meal. The most satiating food you could possibly eat is a baked potato. And so I think it's a fantastic idea to eat baked potatoes. I love to take like a sweet potato and then put a can of black beans on it, some pico, some cut up avocado, and some salsa, and that's my dinner. It's a great carrier for the other fruits and vegetables. Everybody tends to like the taste of starches, and it's very filling.
Okay, so starches include potatoes, squash, corn, what else?
There's starch inside legumes. I consider legumes not starches, but there's starch in there. There's pastas. I love pastas. Pasta is a bad word in America. I think pasta is a great way to get a nice healthy meal. I tend not to choose simple processed flour pasta. I definitely like whole wheat pasta. You could do little tricks if you really want to get active, which is to cook the pasta, put it in a refrigerator, and then reheat it when it's time to eat. And that causes some of the starches to become resistant to breakdown, called resistant starch, which feeds your good bacteria. Interesting tricks. But yeah, rice, pasta, potatoes, quinoas, things like quinoa's grains, but the grain family, all those kind of things.
Got it. All right. I'm coming over to your house for dinner. I can't wait. I want some starch. Okay. So here's a question from Jessica. She says, do we have to worry about getting too much protein on a plant-based diet? Is that even a possibility?
That's an interesting question, and I don't have a good answer for that. You saw one slide in there I showed where they were looking at diabetes, and they showed equal amounts of animal protein versus plant protein, and you can see that the plant protein did not increase the risk of diabetes while the animal protein did.
Correct.
My worry again is a few things. First of all, we don't want to increase IGF-1 too much. If you keep increasing plant-based proteins, if you try to get too much leucine, you will get IGF-1, and we know that IGF-1 may in fact lead to aging and cancer. We also know that leucine could stimulate mTOR, which could lead to aging. These are all coulds. I can't tell you that with any surety. I just question, I don't ever, I can't even tell you how much protein I get in a day. I never count. I don't think of food in terms of protein, carbs, and fat. We're talking about it like right now because I'm trying to dissuade you from doing that. But I just never think that way. I think if you're eating a well-balanced meal that's got a lot of fiber in it, the fiber will naturally limit the amount of food you eat, which will limit the amount of protein you eat naturally. What she's probably referring to is, can you get too much protein shakes? And I don't know, but I'm going to suspect yes. My gut tells me yes. I can't tell you that scientifically.
Right, but that's if you're eating a concentrated protein source. That's, again, it's not from a whole food. It's been refined down into a powder. Then you can, you mix that powder into water or smoothie, and now you're getting a concentrated protein powder.
Yeah, it's interesting when you look at natural foods and you look at the protein content. Take breast milk, for instance. Breast milk is 7% protein. If you look at the percentage of protein consumption of a blue zone person, it tends to be 7 to 10%. If you look at the percentage content of protein in certain vegetables and stuff like that, it tends to be 7 to 10%. That tends to be the ideal percentage of protein. And so if you're eating those foods, that's the percentage of protein you're going to get, and it's probably ideal.
Right. Okay. Melanie has a great question. She says, Dr. Garth, I've been eating a whole food plant-based diet for about 3 months now, and I feel fantastic. However, as I age and approach the age of 60, I'm getting concerned about bone loss. Right now, I'm osteopenic, and I want to make sure that I'm getting plenty of what I need. I know that protein can help strengthen bones. Please tell me what I can do to potentially reverse osteopenia and prevent against osteoporosis.
Right, so there's several studies that actually show that animal proteins may lead to osteopenia. And the way that may happen, and we're not sure, if you look at people on a high protein diet and you look at their urine, they tend, a high animal protein diet, and you look at their urine, there tends to be calcium in the urine. We used to think that calcium was all coming from the bones. It may actually be coming from muscle. But the point being that that may affect the muscle, the bone itself. It may be the acidosis. From being on, like I showed you, Gary Taubes, he may be eating away at his bone because of that acidosis. Calcium is used as a buffer for that acidosis. And certainly we know that a plant-based diet that's low in, so look, you could be on a, there are ethical vegans out there. So in that EPIC study, they looked at this group of people in Oxford that were vegan, but a lot of them were ethical vegans. So they weren't, they're eating Oreos. When you look at their, and Oreos are vegan, believe it or not. When you look at their, fiber content is only 18 to 22 grams, not a lot of fiber. So they can't be eating a lot of fruits and vegetables if that's the case. Some of them were getting less than 500 grams of calcium a day. If they were getting less than 500 grams of calcium a day, they were prone to getting osteoporosis. But if they're getting over 500 grams a day, they weren't. So if you're on a plant-based diet, you're getting over 500 grams a day, you're getting enough calcium, plus you're getting magnesium and phosphorus and all these other things that actually makes you have very healthy bones. So if you want to have healthy bones, I would tell you to do a plant-based diet, but make sure it is a whole food plant-based diet, not a junk food vegan diet. People tell me they're vegan. I have no idea what you're eating when you're vegan. When you tell me you're vegan, you could be eating junk food all day long. You could be very unhealthy. But if you're eating dark green leaves, if you're eating legumes, if you're getting lots of grains, if you're eating fruits and vegetables, you can have extremely healthy bones. And of course, resistance training. Yeah, that might be the most important thing. She needs to have resistance training combined with these fruit and vegetables. But I wouldn't give her, I would never give her a prescription to go and eat more protein. I mean, if you're eating all those fruits and vegetables, you're going to be getting enough protein for your bones.
And going back to what you were talking about metabolic acidosis, let's just make sure that people understand exactly what it is. I think what you're saying is that you're consuming animal-based proteins that contain amino acids that contain methionine, and that contain sulfur. So you have sulfuric amino acids that go into your blood, drops your blood pH, and then that releases calcium from bones and from muscle.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay. So you end up with a net loss of calcium as a result. Okay. So on the same tip here about chronic disease, Jamie asked a really good question. She says, many people eating a ketogenic diet say that it's a good diet to actually use to treat cancer because it reduces the amount of sugar, and sugar feeds cancer growth. Is there any truth to this argument?
Yes. It's funny though, because they get the wrong idea of what ketosis is. So there's been some studies. The studies are way over exaggerated. I mean, a lot of the studies are on rodents and they're very early stage studies. The studies on humans are basically anecdotal. So it hasn't absolutely been proven. There's this effect called the Warburg effect, which says that cancer cells can only use a glycolytic pathway that utilizes sugar. And so ketosis may help with that. However, if you're eating ketosis, but you're eating meat, you're having two bad effects. You're taking away the sugar, but you're also giving the cancer cells methionine, which it needs to grow, and you're stimulating IGF-1, which may be the worst thing you could possibly do for a cancer cell. So if I personally had cancer, I would try a low sugar ketosis diet, but I would do it plant-based. So I would be eating nuts and olives, and I would probably try something like the Prolonged Fast that Walter Longo is doing out of USC. The other thing is people in ketosis eating a high protein diet are shooting themselves in the foot because your body so badly wants sugar that if you are denying it sugar and your glycogen stores drop and you eat protein, your body's going to turn that protein to sugar through a pathway called gluconeogenesis. So if you're going to do ketosis, it has to be extremely high fat. It's very, very hard to do. It's very hard to stay on. You may notice right now I've got a hoarse voice. I almost never get sick. But last week I did the Prolonged Fast, which is a ketosis fast, eating olives and simple soups and things like that. And I got terribly sick from it.
Oh, interesting. So you actually got...
Maybe if I get cancer, I'm not going to do it again. Yeah.
Interesting. And how long was was the fast for?
5 days.
Yeah, right. Okay, so Sonia asked another really good question. She says, sorry, say that again?
I was just experimenting.
There you go. Okay, Sonia, she said she asked a question. If I have a stubborn patient, so she's a medical professional, if I have a stubborn patient who just won't give up on animal products, which one would you suggest to give up? Like, which is the worst of them all, right? You got things like, chicken, you got fish, you got dairy products, and then red meat. What's the worst of all of those?
Well, what I would do is probably just do what Walter Kempner did and get out of WHIP. I'm joking. Look, by far, processed meat. I mean, there's no question processed meat. That's the worst. So we're talking the salamis and the bolognas and the cured hams and the deli meats and things like that. That's the worst. You're not going to do worse than that. Next would be red meat, and we know it's a two-way, so I would drop red meat. Fish is probably the best. I got to say the pescatarians do well in many different things, sometimes better than vegetarians and vegans, probably because of their omega-3 intake. So that's pretty much the order I would take it. A lot of times I kind of refer people to the DASH diet. So the DASH diet's pretty interesting. If you look at US World News Report, every year they get a bunch of experts, analyze all the different diets. DASH always wins as the top diet. Now, the interesting thing is the science behind the DASH diet came from people studying vegetarians. It came from Harvard, from a guy named Sachs, who was looking at hypertension. You want to know how he can cure hypertension with diet, found that vegetarians and vegans get very low levels of hypertension, and they can treat people with hypertension on a vegan diet. The reasons are complex. If you want to know it, it's because plants have a higher level of amino acid called glutamic acid, which is converted to glutathione, et cetera, but let's get away from that science. Bottom line is vegans, vegetarians did better. So he wanted to create a diet to help people with hypertension, but he knew that he couldn't tell America to eat vegan or vegetarian because he thought they would think he was crazy. So he created the DASH diet, which is a very heavy plant-based diet with little bits of chicken and fish scattered through it. So it's more palatable to people that can't go straight to a plant-based diet.
It's a great response. I love it. All right, we got time for 2 more questions here. There's a couple of questions here about why is it that people who eat high protein diets are able to lose weight? How's that possible?
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting phenomenon. So if you go onto a, now you're talking about ketosis diet? I would guess that when they say people seem to equate high protein with ketosis, and they're not the same thing. They're definitely not. And part of the problem is people see people lose weight on ketosis diet, and they're eating a steak on the ketosis diet, so they say, oh, well, then steak must help me lose weight. No. Ketosis is a very different thing. In ketosis, you've depleted your entire glycogen store. So your body runs on glycogen, on carbs. When you deplete your glycogen store, your body thinks it's in starvation, and it has to use a different fuel. And what it does is it starts creating what are called keto acids, beta-hydroxybutyrate, which it then uses as fuel. And so you start breaking down fat for fuel. Now, part of the thing that happens when people go on these diets is that each molecule of carbohydrate, of glycogen, is combined with 2 molecules of water, and so you're losing a lot of water related. And the ketones is a diuretic. So you lose a lot of water. So the scale drops. Doesn't mean that your weight is dropping. It just means that your weight's dropping, but your fat mass isn't dropping. Your water's dropping. The other thing is, one of the side effects of being in ketosis, which I experienced last week, is to not get that hungry because you're almost nauseated from the beta-hydroxybutyrate. It actually makes you feel kind of sick. So you don't eat as much. It's not as much food variety anymore. You're basically eating the same foods over and over again. Mm-hmm. And people do lose weight, but they almost uniformly put it back on afterwards. There's going to be that one Instagrammer or 2 Instagrammers that just do a great job with it long term, but it's very, very rare that that's the case. It's very hard to stick to long term. I would tell you that probably 100% of my patients have tried it at some point in their life and eventually failed.
Yep. I think we've seen this over and over again. And there's not only people who are consuming ketogenic diets who seem to be losing a lot of weight, but also people who are following more like Atkins style diets, Atkins zone, South Beach diet.
Atkins approaches. Yeah, I mean, Atkins is a ketogenic diet. It's supposed to be. I mean, you start in ketosis and add a little bit back, but it's a very, very low carb diet. It starts at 17 grams of carbs. That's extraordinarily low. I mean, you also got to understand that anybody that goes on a diet is going to lose weight. All right? Anybody. I don't care what diet you choose. You're going to lose weight. It's called the Hawthorne Effect. It's this idea that if you think, oh, I'm going on a diet, you will lose weight because you're going to do something different. If you're on a standard American diet and you go on a paleo diet's a hell of a lot better than the donuts and the cheeseburgers that you were doing. And so you're going to lose weight. That's not really the question. The question is, are you going to keep it off? Is it a lifestyle change that you can live with? Does it prevent cancer? Does it reverse heart disease? Does it decrease hypertension? That's what we should be focusing on. It's not just weight.
Absolutely, 100%. Okay, so last question is, if you go for surgery, after surgery, is it necessary to eat a little bit more protein? You're a bariatric surgeon, you know the answer. What is it?
Yeah, this is a question that comes up so many times. Now, in the bariatric surgery, it's fine, because I'll go to a bariatric surgery conference, and we'll sit there for a week, and we're talking about weight loss. We don't talk about food almost at all. We were told a long time ago to tell people to eat 80 to 100 grams of protein, and we tell people eat 80 to 100 grams of protein, and it's crazy. I mean, it's insane. Now, when you're rapidly losing weight, the funny thing about the ketosis diet, Kevin Hall did a great study. He put people in, I don't know who volunteers for this, but spent 2 months in a hospital in a metabolic ward. And he followed everything they ate. And he followed the ketosis group, and he followed a group that was in low-fat group. Low-fat group did better. The ketosis group actually lost muscle. Because remember, I told you, your body will turn protein to sugar in its attempt to get sugar. And so I just have never been convinced that keeping people in ketosis is good long-term. I think it's going to slow their metabolism eventually. And so if I'm telling people to eat a lot of protein and that's all they could fit in this little pouch, they're eventually going to get this ketosis and these kind of problems. I do keep them on protein in the very beginning because as you're cutting down calories tremendously, you will break down muscle. There have been some studies showing that when you have a really big calorie drop, having a higher percentage of protein initially will help, but that's only for about the first 2 months. After that, sorry, losing my voice because of my ketosis diet. After the first 2 months, I stop with the protein. Like I tell my patients, I don't want to hear about protein. I don't want you to talk to me about protein. I don't want to know how much protein you eat. I'm not giving you protein requirements. I'm telling you to eat food. Go to the Forks Over Knives meal planner, make out a meal. That's going to work. I want you eating fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, seeds, dark green leaves. If you're doing that, you're going to be healthy, and that's proven itself over and over again for me.
Perfect. I like to tell people that I eat like a monkey. If you can feed a monkey, you know, monkeys are pretty healthy in the wild.
It's always funny to me in that movie or that TV show Naked and Afraid where they drop people off in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, right.
And, those people are always like, and the announcer's like, he right now really needs protein. And I'm like, he doesn't really need protein. He needs some carbs, you know?
Right.
There was this one, and they've had vegetarians on there that have done extremely well. Like there's this one where the vegetarian's like sitting there chewing on some leaves, and the guy's like, I need protein. I'm going to die. I need protein. And she's just like munching. And then there's another one where they're searching for food, and there's a monkey up there eating this leaf, and no one looks at the monkey, what the monkey's eating. I would go straight to what the monkey was eating.
Right.
So I'm ready for Naked and Afraid. And if any afraid people are
No,
there.
but I think that hits on this subject again, which is that, you know, in the world in which we live in, there's too much information, right? You get constantly bombarded with all this marketing hype about eat more protein, eat more fat, eat more saturated fat. And in reality, the solution is so simple. It's so simple.
Eat what monkey.
Yep. Yeah, eat like a monkey, go outside, and whatever you would find in the wild, that's what you can eat. All right, so thanks so much for your time today. Really, really, really appreciate it. This is great. For those of you who are still on the webinar, see on your screen, you see the forksoverknives.com/go plants. Again, we have a special webinar bonus for you guys today. If you sign up for the meal planner, and you will receive 20% off of a subscription if you become a premium member within the first 48 hours. So hope you guys enjoyed the webinar, and thanks again for your time, Dr. Davis.
Sure, take care, guys.
All right.